Hello, and welcome to Fresh Takes on Tech. Today, we're going to launch our season on regenerative agriculture, which is a topic that's super important and we're hearing a lot about in the news right now in our industry and others. And we are welcoming back to the show Tamara, who's the VP of Sustainability at IFPA, to kick off the season and talk about some of the work that we're doing and what's happening in Regen overall. Thanks for coming back to the show, Tamara.
Thank you so much, Vonnie, for this opportunity to do this great podcast and to always to have a conversation with you.
So let's set a little context on what's going on with IFPA and the USDA and kind of Regen in general. Just kind of tell us, since the last time we talked, which has been a while, like what's happened?
Great question. So what is IFPA, International Fresh Produce Association? We represent the entire supply chain of the fruit, vegetable, and flower industry around the world. What's happening with the USDA is that we had a program with the USDA that started a couple of years ago that was focused on climate smart agriculture. We were recipients of the grant and administrators of the grant. With the change of the administration, some of the philosophies around the program changed, and that change needed to be adapted. And now IFPA is focusing it more on Regen Ag. But to answer your question, what's going on with Regen Ag, where are we focusing it more on Regen Ag? What was it our choice? Is because the Regen Ag conversation around the world has exploded, especially since 2023, when the largest retailers and consumer good companies around the world declare themselves regenerative or put regenerative at the forefront of their strategies. And we knew that was going to impact our industry, and we needed to be ready for it. What we did as an association was get our act together, because it was very confusing. There were a lot of definitions, and we knew that we needed to define the terms of Regen Ag for ourselves, something that would be meaningful for us, but also help us in that journey. And then once we had a definition, thanks to a great working group and a great council that has been working on it. Once we had that background, when the administration changed that climate smart grant into do something different that is focused on conservation and involved in markets, because we had that great footing and that great background, we were able to adapt to that change. And now our portion of the grant is called, very cleverly, Regen Ag.
Great. And so you've picked that back up again and
Yes.
are at a point where we're starting to look at how we're going to work with the industry and how we're going to promote Regen Ag. So talk a little bit about the grant and what it's called now and kind of what's happening with that.
The official name from the USDA is Advancing Markets for Producers. So what the USDA is trying to put together is they want to advance conservation practices, and they want growers that are advancing those practices to be connected to the market and to be able to benefit from the market greatest interest, increasing interest in sustainable practices, conservation practices, regenerative practices. The names vary, but they're basically the same. So that's what they're aiming for, is putting those two together.
So what's the, talk a little bit about the kind of the logistics and the pieces of the grant and the point that we're at right now.
IFP is the administrator of a portion of the grant. In our grant, we are looking to have 100 growers. They pick from a series of regenerative practices, simple practices like nutrition management, water management, low-till, rotations, soil amendments, etc. Classic practices in conservation or Regen Ag. So we pick 100 growers. We recruit 100 growers. Thus far, we have recruited over 70. So we're well on our way. We still are on the recruitment process. Hello, any growers there, come to us. We'll talk more about that. And so the goal is to pick a practice and then We do soil samples on the land based on that practice to see what changes have there been on the soil throughout time. A soil sample in the beginning and at the end, so we can see some indicators of classically known as soil health, carbon in the soil, and other attributes of soil health to see how those practices have improved soil health, ideally, right? We're also taking yield, as you know, so important to see how these practices are impacting yield, because in the end, we want to know if yield increases, decreases, it maintains itself, because all of these practices are an add-on. They're actually something a little different than was done before.
So what's the period of time? So you said like at the beginning and the end, what's the period of time?
That is the more tricky thing. We're dealing with nature and agriculture, and then you put on top an administration over it, and that is not always perfect, right?
Yeah.
But we're measuring 4 years of these practices in the field.
So the point would be to offset some of the risk for the growers, right? To give them money to be able to offset, because that's one of the biggest issues about adoption is that why does the grower always have to take the risk on for trying something new that should be more sustainable? So so they'll get paid to do these different practices, and then for the soil samples and everything that'll get paid for. Is that kind of how it's set up?
Oh, exactly. So that is the key point. And thank you for saying it. The key point is that the growers get very well compensated for these practices. In fact, this new administration has focused on that. Perhaps fewer requirements in terms of what data is gathered from the growers and more focus on supporting the growers on this process, because all of these practices, as we all know, are an investment, and we need to compensate the growers for experimenting with these practices, because there are, for the most part, novel practices. Some of them are more tried and true, but not used in that particular field before.
So growers have seen a lot of sustainability and regenerative programs come and go. What makes A&P is the acronym we use. What makes A&P different, and why should this one feel credible and worth their time?
What's really interesting about our industry is that growers are incredibly curious. You lead innovation, technology. You know the curiosity in our industry is immense, and the growers are there always trying to innovate with practices, etc. So they've been curious for a while for many different reasons to advance this kind of practices. The reasons behind sometimes is sustainability, sometimes it's just to have a better soil, sometimes it's to manage water better, sometimes it's to reduce fertilizer use. The reasons and their priorities differ a little bit, but the practices are the same. And extremely curious on embarking on these efforts, these journeys, right? And so what this grant does is to compensate them for that. So there's not a loss of income in the process. And then also they can measure the most important metric for them, that is always yield, right? And see how changing their management practices that was either costly or complex does provide benefits for them in the long run, but also opening the doors for them in the market. How to tell the story better. We're terrible about telling our story in our industry for the most part, but the grant is focusing on that, giving tools to the growers to tell their stories, connecting them with retailers so they can understand better what they're doing, because retailers are really focused on sustainability and regen ag, as I mentioned before.
Is that a part we're going to administer, or IFPA doing that? Or is that another part of the grant that someone else is going to work with retailers in the storytelling?
We are the ones actually going to be leading that effort along with our partner at Measure to Improve. And IFPA is uniquely positioned to do that because we represent the entire supply chain, and because in our past we had a huge focus on markets and advancing the industry in markets and shows, etc. We do conferences, we convene the industry so we could put suppliers and buyers together, and that's how I think we could benefit very much, the grower community here.
I was talking to an investor yesterday who was doing the drumbeat of how risk adverse growers are. And I just, I chuckle every time I hear that. It's like it's the riskiest business in the world to be in. How can you say that? But his point, of course, was when you're trying to sell a new something into producers, it's really hard to do that because of the risk. And so that's what I love about this program is that it really is. They aren't risk adverse, like you said. They're very curious, but they're not going to risk their whole crop to something that they don't know if it works or not. So it's really important to be able to help them adopt some of these practices in a way that isn't so risky for them.
Absolutely. I think that's a huge point that we need to make. Our industry is the opposite of risk adverse because all of our crops, all fruits, vegetables, and flowers grow in a very short cycle. And so they're continuously changing and evolving. So it's a very rapid, fast, furious type of industry that works with highly perishable products that need to go from field to market in a heartbeat because otherwise they decay. And so short cycles, short supply chains, fast, complex. So all of that makes that mentality and culture in our industry of risk taking and also fast at making decisions. My past is in forestry, and I can tell that it's a huge difference in that industry versus ours. That industry is a very, very slow pace, very adverse to risk taking because those crops are longer term, more complex. And so they get, quote unquote, more stuck. Our industry is anything but stuck. It has the opportunity to continuously evolve and advance and try new things because their cropping season is so short.
Yeah, definitely. And, one storm can come in and wipe it all out.
Exactly.
So there's
yes,
that.
yeah. Risk is always there.
Yeah.
They're used to that. Yeah. It's
So are
not
you
great.
finding
Not great, but it's there. Yeah.
Are you finding that a lot of the growers that you're talking to and working with that are interested, are they people that like this is the first time they've tried regenerative practices, or is it people that have been in it for a long time, or are you seeing a mix?
It's fascinating because I sit in a lot of that initial meeting with a grower when we're going through the program, and you listen to the way they talk. They know exactly what they want, exactly what they want to try. They've been thinking about it for quite a while, or they've been maybe experimenting with it in another field, but they know their stuff. And for a sustainability professional, this is my favorite part because we include one important question in that initial meeting. We say, why are you doing this? And the answer sometimes, it's just, this makes my day. They're doing it for the right reasons. They tell you they're doing it for sustainability. They're doing it for the land. They're doing it for health. They're doing it for all the right reasons. They're really investing in being a more sustainable type of production system. They're really getting the cues from the world and they want to be there. They're really interested and curious about regen ag and they want to excel at it. And so that's one way we're helping them, but they're there already. They know exactly what they're doing and want to do.
One of the things that I see a lot and is a big part of been my job forever is just seeing how we can get technologies like these new technologies to scale. So you get people, things really work in a small plot or they work at the university or they work in some trial somewhere. And then really thinking about, well, how do we get these new technologies that could be amazingly regenerative to scale? So how do you think that this program is going to help move kind of from theory to actual practice on people's farms and scale up the technology so we can get out there to other people beyond the program?
I think that's the biggest benefit of this program is that we're going to experiment with these practices in a real world scenario, take information from it, take data from it, right? That could be translated to growers elsewhere in the US and around the world and in other crops as well. We're trying to be very diverse in the crops that we have in our program. But we're focusing our program geographically between California and Washington State. But there's a climatic diversity there that can be extrapolated to many other regions in the country and around the world. So I think that the learnings, and I think the most powerful thing is that how much we're going to learn and how much we can teach everyone and educate everyone on these practices in other cropping systems as well and in other geographies.
So let's talk a little bit about the business case of these practices. So at the end of the day, growers run businesses. Where does the economic return actually show up? And is it yield stability, input efficiency, market access, premiums, resilience? What are some of the areas where this is going to be a positive beyond the program?
So I think that from an economic and business standpoint, in particular, I mean, we could talk about the environmental benefits, the health benefits, all of those things. But I think that the
They have to stay in business, Yeah.
financial and business strictly, we will get information and to see that input cost is reduced through these practices. So that's one, right? Cost reduction, more effective, more efficient type of production systems in terms of irrigation and nutrition. And then in terms of and then we will learn about yield, right? Is it impacting yield? Is it increasing yield? And this is not, we're not measuring this yet, but I think the next frontier, not with this grant in the future, is about, is this affecting quality? Is this affecting flavor? Something that you love to talk about. And also how they go to the market. So how these growers go to the market and how they market their products. So right now the market wants Regen Ag. They want it. They just don't know how to package it. They just don't know how to market it. So that's the reality as well. So we know that a number of retailers are giving benefits to regenerative growers and practices and putting them in different parts of the retailer space and give them preferences and telling their stories, etc. So I think that is where it goes to see, are you being supported, amplified at the marketplace by with these practices? So that's why we are pushing for. I'm not sure how price is going to change. That we will see that, right, as the project goes along. But I think that at this stage in the regenerative conversation, I don't think we're there yet. It's more about product preference from the retailer side, product placement, and how they place it, also how they tell the story, etc. And at the retailer, and also other buyers as well, because it could be food service, etc. Because that's a huge part of the industry that sometimes we forget to talk about because we see retailers, grocery stores more often, but food service is ginormous and is equally interested in Regen Ag.
Yeah, you see it written on a lot of menus,
Exactly.
I think people make those preferences. And I think that whole market alignment is so important because what we see with everything that people grow in our industry, if the market doesn't pull it through, doesn't value it, doesn't care about it, then it doesn't matter. And why should growers bother? I mean, there is the whole story about the environmental story, which is super important. But I think for growers making decisions and taking risks, we need that market alignment to pull it through. And so you're seeing, and through this program, will you work with some retailers, to try to pull it through and get that market alignment?
Absolutely. So we will be connecting with the retailers in our network to see how we can help advance and place these producers and these products. Also, we have something that we think is really cool that was very successful last year, and is that we had Regen Ag tour, physical tour of the IFPA global show that we have every year. So last year was in Anaheim, this year is in Orlando. What we did there is that we had companies that are working on Regen Ag to be telling their story. We brought people who registered for the tour. So physically, we walked them through the show floor and visited each one of those companies and how they talk about what they're working on and why they're working on it. And I think it was a great opportunity for the retailers. There were journalists, there were politicians. There was just a mixed bag of people there who are really interested in seeing it real life and seeing them tell their story and what they're doing. So we're going to do that this year again. I think that's a great initiative. Further education panels. We will have field days in which we would love to connect also the market, so the buyer community, with the growers.
Great. Yeah, that connection is important. And the tour was amazing. I was working and just got to look at it happening, but it was there was a lot of people involved, and I
Yeah,
think it really brought to light, all parts of the supply chain.
right. Exactly. Yeah.
So, what does success look like if we're sitting here in 4 years and we say that, oh, the program worked? What's different for the participating growers, and what's different for what was the real impact of the program?
The protagonists of this story are the growers. So for the grower community, I hope that one, they got to trial practices that they were important to them, first of all, and they got compensated for. So there was no financial loss. And so they were advancing in their already existing goals. So that's one. Also, for the grower community, that we can help them be better prepared for what the market is demanding. In this case, is regenerative agriculture, even if it's at its infancy in the ways which marketed. But we're going to help them with that. And then the third, so important, is that we're going to get this wealth of information,
Mm.
data for all of us about how this work and how can this be applied at a larger scale, and what worked and also what didn't work so well. All of that will be extremely important. Learning, a huge learning opportunity for our industry.
So, if a grower, you're still recruiting growers,
Yes,
right?
we are. Yes.
So, if a grower is listening to this or they know someone, and they're thinking maybe this is worth exploring, what should they do? And what would you say to a grower that's like, well, I don't know if I want to do it, that's kind of on the fence?
Come to us. Come to IFPA. Google us, and you will find us. And then you can have a conversation with us. Even if you're just mildly curious, just talk to us. I think there's a huge opportunity for them. The compensation package is significant, and also the learning opportunity, also, and the support that you will get from us and our partners from Measure to Improve will be a very great experience. Also, you will get to meet other growers who are working like you. And growers are extremely collaborative. They love to learn from one another. So this is a great opportunity for them to collaborate and to learn from others.
So, is there a deadline, or is it kind of a rolling application? Is there a deadline by when they need to reach you?
No huge deadline, but we have a timeline that we want to follow. We would like that by the end of the fall, we have recruited all of the growers necessary. We're very confident that we will. This project, it's been going on for 2 years. We had a year stop for the transitioning in the administration, but in the previous iteration of the project was very successful in terms of engagement with growers and recruitment. So I think that we will be equally successful this time.
And it'll fill up. So, if don't wait. If you're
Don't wait. Just come to us. This is, I think, a really fantastic opportunity for them. I'm only grateful to be able to work with them.
and it's mostly focused California, Washington states, and any specialty crop. Is that
All of them,
okay?
the full gamut. So fruits, vegetables, and flowers. As long as you're fruits, a vegetable, or a flower, you're welcome to come to our program. California and Washington State, this time we wanted to keep it manageable for us and highly focused.
Great. Well, thank you, Tamara. I'm so excited to see this up and going again. And it makes such a difference because, we're developing, and we're in my seat, we're developing all these different technologies
Yes.
that never make it to market. And so this is a way to get the risk off the growers and get products and practices to market that is better for the growers, the consumer, the retailer, the planet. So thank you for working on this program. And I really appreciate you talking about it.
Thank you, Vonnie, for amplifying our voice and always for a great conversation.